Cadieux, we're just getting started. Thank you very much for your interest in today's AMA event. I'm just turning everything on. As you know, a lot of you have been here before. I'm getting everything spun up on LinkedIn, the live feeds and things like that. So just give me a couple of seconds and I will be ready to introduce you to Jim Hussey, who's probably one of the biggest subject matter experts I've ever seen in SaaS. Super excited to have this conversation with him today. And for those of you who know me, you know this is right in my strike zone. So really excited to be talking about something that I spent probably 20 years doing. So just give me a second. I got LinkedIn refresh. It looks like we're live, but I just want to verify that we are live. Checking the feed on LinkedIn right now. Certainly looks like we're live. Wow, LinkedIn's got something new, Jim. I just noticed that. Now on the Procurement Foundry website, if you're live, it's at the top of the page now. That's pretty cool. So wow, LinkedIn's upgrading their user interface. So just going to shut off the video, the audio on that, so that I don't want it, so that I don't hear myself talking through LinkedIn. Anyway, hello everybody. Welcome to a very busy schedule over the next couple of weeks of Procurement Foundry live events. Hi everybody on LinkedIn. We got about 15 or 20 people on LinkedIn already. Got about 30 people inside of the Zoom room. Thank you very much for coming today. I think this is going to be amazingly beneficial to IT sourcing executives and specifically folks who are responsible for software category management, IT asset management, things like that. We've got an exciting hour, and it's just Jim and I. I haven't done a mono discussion in a while here, so I'm super excited. I don't know if I should have picked somebody who who played Division III. Jim and I in the run through said we were talking about football. And Jim played college ball. I didn't, so I think he probably beat me in the blocking drill. But hopefully, I can hold my own in this conversation today. Jim Hussey from MPI. Thank you for coming. Pleasure to have you on. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Jim, and tell us a little bit about your background and what you do at MPI. I'd love to hear your story a bit.
Mike, thanks for the introduction. And I must say, it's been really fun to get to see Procurement Foundry and what you guys are up to. As you can tell, I've got gray hair and I've been around this industry for a lot of years. And I think what you guys are doing really brings a lot of value and excitement into the segment. Hello all, again, Jim Hussey, and I'm really excited to be here today. I recently put out a book called The Survival Guide to SaaS Optimization. And within that book, I developed the Empowered SaaS Optimization Framework. And really what that's done is it brought me back to my origins way back when in my journalism and research days. But currently I'm with NPI. I lead their SAM and SaaS optimization practice. It's really a great organization, great place to be, and looking forward to being able to field whatever questions the team has today on this important and fast-moving subject.
Thanks. Really appreciate it. Amazing that's not the only book you've written, right? Though you've written a number of books in the area, right?
Correct. I started way back when. Again, I was with newspapers such as Computer World, Byte Magazine, Federal Computer Week.
Byte Magazine. Oh my goodness, that's fantastic.
Great publication, and really, what was the first to move to the .com world. But I got exposed to the world of offshore outsourcing and wrote a book called Managing Global Development Risk. My co-author in that effort was a gentleman named Steve Hall. And then this time last year, I put out a book, the SAM Leader Survival Guide, which really focused in on the challenges of SAM. And through that effort, plus the experiences that I was having, not only in my corporate role previously, but working with clients in the market, began to go deep into the issue around SaaS, since it's so raw right now. It's so new and emerging that I thought that would be the best way to bring the community together through a series of interviews, not only with the SAM management platform CEOs and leaders, but also customers who are wrestling with the challenges today.
Yeah. So thank you, by the way, to you and the folks at MPI. For those of you who don't know, MPI is one of our newest permanent resident sponsors at Procurement Foundry. We'll talk about that a little bit more at the end of this whole thing. We really try to keep this TED Talk style educational. And I know Jim and I could probably chop it up here for software as a service for a couple of hours. We're going to limit this to 60 minutes. I'm going to do some quick housekeeping. As most of you already know, we've got 40, 50 people inside of the Zoom room. Thank you for pre-registering. If you're inside of the Zoom room and you would like to engage, please put your questions into the Q&A module for us. As you know, I don't like to wait till questions at the end. I love to chop it up and put them in as they flow. So if you hear something that we're talking about, please jump in and add your 2 cents. Ask Jim a question. He has told me that he wants to get flooded with questions today. So I'm happy to do that with him. And obviously, as usual, if we don't get to all of the questions at the end, now that they're permanent residents, they've got a channel inside of the Procurement Foundry, and we can continue the conversations there. I think we're probably going to invite Jim onto some of our Clubhouse events as well. Now that Clubhouse just opened up inside of not only iPhone, but they're also doing, they've opened it up to everybody. So excited to have maybe Jim on some Clubhouse mixers, and hello to the, 25 people on LinkedIn as well. So I'm going to be monitoring LinkedIn as well. If you have questions for us, for Jim and I, please put them in the chat inside of LinkedIn. I'll get to you. Hello, Julian. Hello, Matt. Hello, everybody. Great to see you all, and thank you all for everybody attending. So with that, Jim, software as a service, right? Man, I'm, we both have great beards here. We're both probably children of the perpetual licensing models, AS400. SaaS comes into play, and all of a sudden it completely changes the whole thing, right? Let's talk a little bit about the current environment associated with SaaS. I mean, it is the 800-pound mountain gorilla of software. It is taking everybody by storm. There's concerns around risk. We're talking today about why inside of software SaaS estates, why there's so much toxic spend. We're going to talk about your definitions of toxic spend, which I'm super excited about, because you threw out zombie, I threw out executive jewelry. I think we've got some amazing things there. Tell me a little bit about what's going on from a percentage basis from your experience at MPI. Where are you seeing the portfolio of SaaS right now? How much adoption is there? Where is SaaS from a portfolio perspective inside of most mid-sized enterprise class companies right now?
Yeah, and yeah, Mike, as you know, I like zombie spend and toxic spend as well. What we're really seeing is SaaS is a multi-headed monster. And when you look at it from a procurement perspective, vendor management, InfoSec, third-party risk, when you look at this beast, what you see is your top 5 spend for software is increasingly becoming dominated by SaaS. Whether it's Salesforce.com, Office 365 is a growing component of your Microsoft relationship. ServiceNow, of course, has taken over the world as well. So you're probably seeing a great deal of your top 5, top 10 software spend now going into the SaaS model. In addition to that, you now have this long tail of more tactical, functional, task-specific type of SaaS that's proliferating throughout your environment. So we really need to understand what are the logical groupings, what are the logical segments, and try to get them to be defined so you can begin to manage it. So typically what I'm seeing, Mike, when working with clients and talking with other experts in the SaaS category, is we're beginning to see that 30 to 40% of your software spend today could likely be attributed to a SaaS model, and that is doing nothing but accelerating, which obviously brings up the challenges of how do you optimize, how do you govern, how do you protect your business?
Right. Wow, 30 to 40%. That's a big number. I think you're absolutely right. It's interesting. I think if you break it out into segments, I think if you talk enterprise class systems, it's probably 20%. I think if you talk tail spend systems outside of traditional IT, it's probably even higher than that, right? And that's one of the things I want to talk to you about. From a SaaS perspective, I mean, and I'm talking to people all the time about this now, it seems like everything we do is a technology sourcing exercise in some way, shape, or form, right? So what's happening from a SaaS arena when everything that's coming at you, I mean, it's not just IT anymore, right? I mean, you've got SaaS materials coming in from you from MarTech and FinTech and HR tech and what I'm now coining buy tech from the procurement side. I mean, I never thought I would see the day when ERP systems or cloud-based SaaS solutions but you can run your ERP system in the cloud now, right?
Right.
And
Absolutely.
it's mind-boggling to me that, the most critical of systems, which is running the finance of your company, at least up until a certain point, is all cloud-based, right? So tell me a little bit about the dynamics associated with that. Tell me about what you're seeing from just the overwhelming perspective of almost everything now is SaaS, right?
So you're absolutely right, Mike. The core is changing, right? The systems that run your business, whether it's your value chain, supply chain, internal reporting requirements, are all moving to that type of delivery mechanism. It's obviously very, very beneficial to the software organizations. It's beneficial to us as clients because they're able to provide us the updates in a much more seamless fashion. So there's a great deal of value on both ends to the SaaS providers as well as us as the SaaS consumers. But what it does do is it pushes on us the responsibility to make sure we're taking full advantage of these SaaS capabilities, which again is an element of optimization. But we also want to make certain that we are as efficient as possible. And that efficiency really is driven by tying together multiple data sources to make sure your licenses are effectively managed. Individuals have the types of licenses that are most efficient and what they need, and that people are harvested or removed based on the ebb and flow of the operation. One of the things that you made me think of, Mike, when you brought up the challenges around this is, in my corporate role, I was assigned, and I'll put that in quotation marks, responsibility for owning the Salesforce.com relationship. And as I reached out across the organization, I found out that there were 39 groups. Each of them had an individual who felt they owned the Salesforce relationship. So I think that brings about an interesting dynamic, whereas as you're talking with ERP, you know who you should be talking to and working with to optimize and really drive, your Oracle, your S/4HANA, and these other enterprise that are moving into the SaaS model. But there's a lot of people involved, not just IT. And you really need to understand how are we going to make them realize the benefit that their budget is meant to cover. So sorry about that. I'll come back on point.
No worries at all, man. No worries at all. And I think you're absolutely right. I think the roles and responsibilities and the dynamics that are taking place are changing drastic, very, very quickly, right? And we're going to talk about that a little bit. I'm going to stick a pin in that for a second, because one of the things I am interested in talking a little bit about is, with your role at NPI, you're talking to a lot of folks about where they're attempting to optimize their SaaS, or even just get their SaaS platforms under control, right? From a strategy perspective, because you're talking about something that moved radically from a capital perspective to an OpEx perspective almost overnight, right? So there's expectations from the office of the chief financial officer all the way down. I'm interested in maturity levels right now. So, and I'm interested in everybody here, do me a favor. If you're in the Zoom room right now, and I'm not good at setting up polls inside a Zoom room, I'll fall on my sword on that. Probably should have done it. If you're inside of the Zoom room right now, and if you're inside of inside of LinkedIn, and you're watching this, do me a favor, reply inside of the chat and reply on LinkedIn. Where are you from a maturity level inside of your software asset management and SaaS management program, in your opinion? 1, I don't even know how to spell SaaS. 5, we're in the matrix, we're plugged in, we're totally optimized, we've got rogue spend under lockdown, and all of the nobody's at a 5. If anybody says 5, I'm gonna call on them. So
get them on the phone.
Don't answer. Yeah, let's just get you in here. We'll shut Jim off, and we'll just let you talk about how you're killing it. Okay. So that said, thank you. I'm seeing a lot of 3s. The LinkedIn folks haven't started replying yet because we're on tape delay with LinkedIn by a few seconds. A lot of 1s, maybe a 2, 2.5. Thank you for your honesty. Appreciate that. 1.5, 2.5. Michael Likens chiming in. Michael, good to see you. Thank you. Lots of 2.5s and 3s. I'm seeing them, Jim. Where are you seeing, from your perspective, because of the fact that you're in the consulting side of this all day long, where's the maturity level at in this? And number 2, are there any shining stars in the maturity model? Is there a category? Is there an industry? where you're seeing shining stars. So what's your experience so far with maturity level?
So, and it's always a tough question to answer, Mike, because people may have different views of maturity. So just to level set, I draw on my corporate experience where I was responsible for vendor management, third-party risk management, and software asset management and others. What I would say from a maturity standpoint is I see greater focus in consumer CPG and financial sector. They're asking all the right questions. The organizations I've been working with, and they're taking proactive measures in there. And in particular, it's in the enterprise category. So they're focusing on employee experience. So you have your Office 365, and then you may have more focus around Salesforce. ServiceNow is largely handled by your ITSM or organization. So there's some maturity emerging there. What I see in general is that there's people, probably many who are joining us today, who they recognize it's an issue and they're planning and they're developing their strategies. So I wouldn't put that on a maturity. I would say they're getting ready to formally put in place measures to begin to address SaaS, whether it be an optimization focus, because as we'll talk about, optimization has many different layers or levels, or maybe there's a chief compliance officer that has said, hey, I'm worried about where my data is. So I see from a maturity standpoint, organizations are still very young, but the market is moving rapidly, and these organizations are moving rapidly, trying to jump in and bring forward the solutions. The SaaS management platform tools are proliferating. The teams with expertise and analyst expertise, leveraging the portals that are available to them, 3 of these SaaS providers, all of that is emerging just now. So for me, on a scale of 1 to 5, I'd say on average companies are 1 to 1.5, but very focused, making investments, and I think they'll begin to achieve some really outstanding results in the enterprise class, where the more focus they put there, the more value and benefit I believe they'll realize.
Quick question already. We're starting to get questions. Aaron, I just read your message inside of the Q&A section. If you could do me a favor and just wrap that into a question for me, I'd really appreciate it. Looks like she's saying we're really struggling to bring all of our SaaS into the IT fold. We're finding several tendencies to sign up for a product. The price is really low, different things that are leading to issues associated with management of that. Wrap that into a question for me, Aaron, and I'll get it back on. Larry asks inside of the room, if an organization wants to manage their software assets effectively, is there a ballpark number of people that need to manage X number of software titles with X number of people on groups or groups of people? Any thoughts on that?
That sounded more like a straight up SAM question. Am I correct, Mike?
Yeah, I think he's leaning towards, hey, listen, man, I got a massive portfolio of software licenses. Is there a metric on how many people I should have on my team? Is it dollar spend? Is it number of titles? Is it, risk? Some SaaS is a risk level 1 versus a risk level 5. And we'll talk about risk in a second. But his question was just kind of around, hey, designing an organization, is there a best practice associated with where he should be staffing up against?
So I lived through this, so I can share with you my experience. If I'm building a SAM organization, there's a great deal of value in having a platform, and so whether it's Flexera, Snow, USU, ServiceNow, that's would be the corporate decision. Then you look at your top 5 spend. Typically, you're going to see Microsoft, IBM, Oracle, SAP. Each of those are so unique and different that I would take my top 5 spend and try to have an analyst for at least my top 3 dedicated. And then what I would do is I'd be looking for somewhat of a bullpen, 2 or 3 analysts that would be able to be extracting the reconciliation coming out of my tool and generating my reporting. So typically, if you're looking at, let's say, north of 50 mil in annual software spend, or maybe 100 mil, I think you're looking at your platform, a leader, and then perhaps 5 to 6 team structured in the manner I described.
Wow, that's a good number. I don't know that there's a lot of people there. I got to be honest with you. I think we're probably, if you take that number as a guideline, I think a lot of us are probably understaffed at the moment, which is why we're reaching out to organizations like MPI and saying, hey, I'm drowning here. I need help, right?
Well, then it's a skill conversation, right? But which is why managed service has become or becoming more prevalent in the world of SAM, is because not only it's difficult to have the individuals, but it's also a mindset. If I had it to do over again, I would hire all former auditors. And boy, they look at the data, and I'm blessed today. My team at MPI is led by a gentleman of Big Four background. Our team of analysts all have an audit orientation, and that just means the way they triangulate data and the gaps that they find lead to process improvement.
Yeah, I think that's a great nugget. I usually try to type nuggets as fast as possible up on the screen. I can't do it today because we're just in a one-on-one session, and usually I take advantage of the fact that I have a panel of people to be able to interact with the audience. But I'm going to verbally commit this. Nugget number one on the day: think about hiring previous auditing experience folks to come into your SaaS organization or your IT category management teams. Fantastic thought from Jim there. I love it. Just like I'm saying, hey, you probably need to go find a data scientist or a data analyst to come somewhere onto your procurement team as well. I love the idea of having somebody from audit, and not necessarily from software audit, right, Jim? You're just talking about people who've got audit analytic experience of any type coming into your organization.
Correct. And that feeds into, what we see in SaaS optimization today is there's a lot of data that's accessible to you, whether from your SaaS management platform, the portal that's available to you. But someone who's an auditor is going to start to look at the other system generated reports that they can bring into the mix and really drive what I call level 2, 3, and 4 optimization. And ultimately, that's where I think in the enterprise class and the human capital management class, things like Workday, SuccessFactors, that's what's required in that group. When you begin to get to that long tail of spend, now you're talking about someone leveraging the SaaS management platform and really just trying their best to leverage the power of those tools. Yep.
Question on this topic on point. Where do your SaaS management platforms come into play? If I spend on the tech, what role can consulting and internal team members play to help interpret, capture the savings?
Okay, so let me try to answer that, Mike. Make sure I have that. So the individual is asked, if I buy a SaaS management platform, who should be leveraging it to be able to action it? Let's say.
That's what it sounds like. Yeah.
Okay. And as I just mentioned a moment ago, what I'm finding a lot of is procurement organizations and sourcing leaders are assigning the task to team members. So if you're the SAM category manager or IT, say desktop or EUC type support, suddenly now you're responsible for SaaS. You get a powerful tool like Xylo or Blissfully, and it's giving you all this great data.
Right.
But how the heck do you action it? I'm very big on segmentation. So it's one, understand your universe, right? You have to fully understand what is your SaaS portfolio look like, and then make sure you know where your richest optimization focus is. And again, I believe that's in the enterprise class. And then those tools will offer you some automated optimization guidance, but you still have to action it. So I do believe as things are taking shape today, organizations are either going to invest in an internal team, and I refer to that as the SaaS optimization office, or B, they'll begin to look at a managed service that can monitor, take action, and execute the workflows per approvals that have been, processes that have been pre-approved. So I do see the volume of data coming in, requiring people to action it, and it is a challenge today. The proverbial fire hose, I believe, is what we could refer to it as.
Right. So let's jump back for a second. I know we talked a little bit already about SaaS. We talked about what's out there, kind of the landscape, where the maturity levels are with everybody. From your perspective and from your expertise, SaaS optimization, how big of an opportunity is this inside of your portfolio? I'm managing $50 million worth of spend right now inside of a SaaS portfolio. I'm at a maturity level of, I'm going to be generous and say we're at a maturity level of 1.5, right?
Okay.
And you just, you figure out what the 1.5 is out of a scale of 1 to 5. What's the opportunity here for me if I'm doing this the right way? What percentage can I knock off of my portfolio in toxic spend? And I know we haven't defined our different definitions of toxic spend yet, but I'm just overall, in general, if I'm at a 1 and I got to invest some money, what can I see in potential return on ROI here?
I'll work back to that. Okay, Mike. So Gartner has put the 30% number out there, and then others in the SaaS categories, ILO and others have talked about 30% toxic or wasted spend.
Yep.
What I'm finding is that even if an organization has made an investment today in a team, and their focus is on optimization, and whether that be Salesforce, ServiceNow, Adobe, Microsoft, which tends to be the area of focus, that I'm still finding that on average, we're like 12 to 14 to 15% optimization on annual spend. And what we're finding is that it's all the data's there. It's the normalization and rationalization of the data that the teams aren't able to get to yet. Okay. So now if an organization does not have a staff dedicated, and it's the poor sourcing individual who's been handed this responsibility.
Right. You got one guy managing 50 million.
Yeah. And even if it's a guy in a tool, right? And they're sitting there staring at the data, we're finding consistently 18 to 23, 24%. And again, that cuts across the enterprise category. The percentages for optimization in the non-enterprise class, HCM, which is very interesting. So for those of you out there who work in Workday or SuccessFactors or others, we do find an interesting hybrid approach where we're finding optimization opportunities in that 20 to 30%, as well as potential compliance exposure. So what happens though, the reason I bring HCM up is when we're looking at these percent optimization, the large part of it is license related, but the contributor to that, the root cause tends to be alignment of internal processes, right? So someone leaves the organization, you enter that in SailPoint goes out and shuts off access, but who harvested the license, right? So the license is still sitting out there. So it's just helping people connect the dots and have that aha moment on how they can do things better. So those are the numbers that we're typically seeing. And again, the percents I'm using are based on your annual spend. So if you're spending, $5 million a year with Salesforce, and you feel like your sales cloud, your service cloud, $5 million, you could potentially have $1 million or more that you could optimize, reinvest in other core services that
or staff up, right? Or staff up. Staff up. I tell people this all the time: procurement, supply chain, sourcing, strategic sourcing, whatever the heck you want to call what we do for a living. I like to call it professional shopping with somebody else's money. Whatever it is that we do, it's coin operated, right? The more you put in, the more you get out, right? And in these cases, you're talking about, and I threw the example out there of $50 million portfolio with 1 or 2, ladies or men operating that. Maybe they got a tool deployed. You're talking 12 to 15% on enterprise class, 12 to 23% on non-enterprise class, or even higher, right? The money's there. You're talking $7-10 million in recovery capabilities. You can staff $500,000 worth of people against that and still get a 10x ROI, which is best in class, right?
Absolutely.
This is a no-brainer, in my opinion.
And we're not recreating the wheel, right? So sourcing did a great job of creating vendor management in the world of outsourcing. Sourcing did a great job of creating telecom expense management. Right. So really sourcing is in the position, and I believe aligned with the CFO and your chief of compliance, to create the sales optimization function. And I think ultimately that's what's going to happen. And it's individuals such as who are joining us today who are going to be the beacons to drive that activity.
All right, I want to jump because we're running out of time already. And like I knew we were going to, we're going to fill this out very quickly. The lines are hot with questions. I'm going to hold on questions for a minute because I know we've got a risk situation here. The way SaaS is designed, it's almost like anybody can buy this stuff at any given time. And I used to be part of a very large advertising marketing organization. And it gets a little bit scary when you got 43,000 people in the United States. Everybody's got a corporate card, and all of a sudden Adobe releases a new product and it's swipe and use, baby. Or in cloud services, even where people can just swipe a corporate card and spin up an instance of a server because they want to go play around with a database. And all of a sudden, number one, your spend has gone completely off the reservation from Amazon or from somebody like that. But number two, it's not affiliated with your corporate agreement because it came in under a separate card. And now all of a sudden you're not getting the discounts that you're supposed to be getting, that your procurement department spent, an entire decade trying to negotiate, right? So there is a risk part to this, as well as a cost optimization part.
Absolutely, and that's where the power of a SaaS management platform. And for all of you, I'm agnostic, right? So we at MPI don't support any one platform or the other. My opinion is you need one. So and because of this, to your exact point, the opportunity to consolidate, make sure that you have those licenses all aligned under that one particular vendor. And as we talk about risk, it begins to multiply out into different definitions. So again, back to my corporate life, I had the chief compliance officer saying, "Why is my Russia data in Costa Rica?" And
yeah.
and that brings about a different conversation. Which so there's the opportunity to centralize, and I do know a lot of people in SaaS will talk about application rationalization, and personally, I think that's a struggle. I think if the individual business units have gone out and purchased the SaaS platform, telling them that, Joe over here is using a similar platform, so you should use his or hers, I think that's a tough conversation. I'd rather have the conversation saying, how can we as the SaaS optimization office help you make sure you're spending your money efficiently and getting full value for your investment? I think that changes the dynamic. So they're not shadow IT, but they're an extension of your organization that you're empowering.
Yeah, I completely agree. A couple of things I'm just listening to while I'm listening to you, and I'm reading through some of the chat. Chat is amazingly off the hook today. First things first, Michael Metcalf, if you want a hat, you know how to get one, buddy. We've already talked about this. The new Procurement Foundry swag is out and people are salivating for it. Number two, back into the room here. SaaS is like Hotel California. You can never leave. That might be the quote of the afternoon right there from Michelle. I love it. No one wants to leave once they've drank the Kool-Aid. It's too sweet, right? So obviously people feel that there's a little bit, I could feel the groundswell almost around the fact that SaaS as a model tends to unwillingly or unknowingly trap companies into this. So let's talk about the trap, right? So the conversation, and now I want to get into the deep of this. We talked about toxic spend. You've got some words. We were kicking around things yesterday. Tell me your different categories of toxic spend. I'd love to hear that and some examples of toxic spend inside of SaaS.
And there's so many levels, right? So what makes for us is if you're looking at optimization as simply getting a renewal and being able to negotiate a few points off it, that's optimization, but it's extremely superficial. What we look at, we as MPI and we with our methodology, is we look at the multiple layers. So first and foremost, we're going to look at your portal data. We really want to understand usage. We run that usage against your Active Directory and a number of other internal data sources, because what we find is that there's a lot of licenses that have been assigned, and the individuals, whether they be contractors or employees, they're no longer at the organization. So there's a chance to optimize there. You'll find that people have been assigned a certain profile. They're not taking full advantage of those. So you're able to reclassify your profiles, which from a maturity standpoint, I'm seeing more and more focus, whether you're ServiceNow, Salesforce, or Microsoft, a lot more discussion around what's the right profile mix so I can be as efficient as possible. And then what you're able to do is, again, looking at it from an auditor's perspective, a highly curated approach is you normalize, rationalize these multiple data points, and you're able to find some really interesting conflicts. People who have been assigned multiple licenses, so they switched from one to another and they didn't harvest the first one. We've also seen espresso machines be assigned the most expensive Office 365 version. So there are many
That's
different.
classic. By the way, I've seen that as well. I've seen it as well. Right? It's the old adage around fax machines that have an E3 license. It's like, why does my fax machine have an E3 license? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and copiers, right? And so what that does is it gives you the optimization layers, right? And what I see today is the SaaS management platforms, they're doing a good job getting the basic. But they all have roadmaps and they're all looking to invest and they're all looking to grow. And many of them are talking about SaaS managed service type capabilities, because at the end of the day, you need eyeballs, you need gray matter to really look at these different data sources to make sure you're optimized. The other thing it does, though, Mike, is by going through that optimization exercise, you're not just looking at the financials, but you're beginning to see the process alignment and where can processes be improved upstream and downstream. And that's another value that we as SaaS optimization can bring to the organization, whether it's access or InfoSec issues or third-party risk issues, or upstream where it's HR types of issues. So if you think about it today, Workday may assign someone as a particular job category. That triggers a specific license being issued, and then suddenly that individual who's a consultant's left the organization. So as you can see, it's a multi-pronged, multi-layered type of effort to really get your arms around this, which is why I believe a dedicated staff makes the most sense.
Yeah, I love the term that you use. I love zombie spend, right, with the espresso machine. I threw out executive jewelry spend, right? I've had so many executives who have told me, I need the full, Microsoft. I need the full Adobe suite, right? Because I head up an advertising agency, and I'm like, listen, man, you barely know how to use PowerPoint. Let's be honest, okay? You're rolling into a room, you're giving a presentation, you're not doing any. Yeah, but I need the $3,000 a year Acrobat suite. Adobe suite, right? And so I call it executive spend. I got one else, which is the FOMO spend, which is I haven't used Publisher. I haven't used one of the ones. The biggest FOMO spend I ever saw was around Microsoft Project, right? And it was like, oh, I need to have a project license. And I'm like, yeah, but you haven't opened project in 9 months. And they're like, yeah, but I'm going to have a project coming any day now where I'm going to be named on the project. And now with Project Server, I need to have the project license. And I'm like, all right, man, but when that happens, I'll load you up. We have a self-service portal now. You spin it up. We pay for it when you need it, right? So there's a lot of different places where this all happens, right?
Yep. And to your point about executives, right? So what's happening is whether you're Workday or SuccessFactors or Salesforce, all of those executives now have the license types that allow them to view it instantly on their mobile and be dynamically up to date on all their important things they must track.
Yeah. So quick question. So from LinkedIn, a little bit out of thread, but we're going to talk about that. Then I want to come back and I want to talk a little bit about who's responsible for all of this, because we touched on it earlier. I want to come back and talk about that. Greg from LinkedIn, and great conversation taking place on LinkedIn right now. How are you managing the consultancy side of the spend associated with SaaS implementations? How does that usually work? Because in a lot of cases, it's the SaaS organization as well as, so there's an aspect to that as well as the portfolio. Do you marry that together? Do you work that all in? Is there a best practice there that you might want to throw out real quick?
Really good question. And yes, we're seeing a lot of consultancy, a lot of config work when you're dealing with the enterprise class. right? So typically, as you said, Mike, you swipe your credit card, and in those functional, tactical SaaS offerings, you're up and running. But in terms of ServiceNow and your HR systems, HCM systems, and particular Salesforce, you're seeing a lot of configuration be sit on top, a lot of consultancies, advisory firms who are really digging into build on top of those platforms. And as that happens, it gets more and more integrated. We look specifically at the agreements, the usage, and the optimization of the platforms. And I have not had a great deal of exposure to those configurations and negotiating those types of agreements in my current role. In my corporate role, I handled those separately. I always kept the platform separate from those third parties that were going to be working on it. There's too many service levels, and the work is so very different. I always tried to keep them separate.
Yep.
So hopefully that hits the mark for what the individual asked.
Great, thank you so much. Let's talk about ownership and responsibility here. Very clear cut. Back in the day, IT owned perpetual. Then IT started to get support from procurement organizations. Then IT category managers came along and we spun it all out for whatever reason. Conflicts of interest, expertise levels, the fact that we had guys staring at blinking lights, negotiating hardware contracts, and we said, hey, that's probably not a good thing. Whatever the purpose of creating a procurement organization with IT, now the question is this another evolution point? And who should be responsible for this, right? You've got some real strong opinions on that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on who ultimately is responsible for owning the SaaS portfolio nowadays, because it's so complicated and there's so many moving parts to it.
And there's a political element to it as well that we have to recognize. And we talk about shadow IT and so forth. So here's in the day, like if you think about software asset, hardware asset, right? If I was sitting and going to different stakeholders in the organization, let's say, well, what are your thoughts on hardware asset management and how we dispose of our assets? They'd look at me and say, Jim, I don't have time for this. Get out of here.
Yeah.
But if I went to that same individual today and said, hey, what are your thoughts on SaaS applications in the environment, and what does it mean to your operation, and how would you assess whether or not we should be doing business with these SaaS providers? Everyone has an opinion. SaaS is impacting every functional area in your organization. So I firmly believe that the owner of this should be within sourcing, within the CFO's organization. And I believe a powerful partner to that is compliance or third-party risk or operational risk, whatever else is in your organization. The CIO may have some influence and certainly an involvement, but I find that when you get out to the business units, the CIO could be viewed as trying to wrestle back budget. And as you know, it all comes down to budget, and this is mine, and you're going to pry it from my cold dead hands. So what I believe is a collaboration across InfoSec, third-party risk, vendor management, software asset management, of course, sourcing, and IT finance. It's going to be that team coming together that really will begin to form the nucleus of what are the policies, what are the controls, how are we going to optimize this, how are we going to govern it to protect our business, how are we going to govern it to enable and grow our business. So ultimately, I do think the sourcing organization is in the best position in the most effective position to control SaaS.
Yeah, I like the idea of the team approach. I like the idea of having an influence from the finance team, somebody who's thinking about that, something I love the idea of somebody from the risk side of the equation, maybe even the legal side associated with, and we talked about this a little bit during the pre-chat, a little bit around the inherent risk associated with SaaS as a entity, right? I mean, there's a lot of, not necessarily in the enterprise class, but even in the mid-market and tail spend related areas, there's a lot of SaaS organizations that are one round of funding away from going, turning over and going turtle, right? Right. And if you don't have that code in escrow and it becomes an intricate part of your system right now, You know, if you're banking on, hey, some startup that's got some amazing new HR functionality or MarTech or FinTech, and you don't have the risk folks associated to talk about, hey, clauses for termination, escrows associated with the software, being able to spin up your own environment, get it, just the fact you want to get your own data out, right? I mean, these are all things that probably somebody in risk needs to be involved with, and somebody from strategic sourcing. I kind of see it as the strategic sourcing person, the SaaS management person, orchestrating a band of indirect related relationships to get the most out of this. Is that really where this is going?
I believe so, absolutely. And to the question that came up earlier, if you're doing configuration work and customization work with a SaaS platform that is not in the enterprise class, then that would be a high risk, because to your point, you're embedding something into the core fabric of your environment, and their survivability is questionable. It just is. We've all been through these explosions in categories and then the reduction and settles. So it's a very predictable path that we're going to be going down here in the area of SaaS platforms and SaaS applications.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask you a quick question. I was just looking at our footnotes, seeing where I got to take the conversation next, but we're already there. We're talking about the evolution of the talent pool, and the talent pool really needs to evolve into almost a project management role and portfolio management role, and also needs to be almost a student of the game of where the SaaS model is going. And let's not forget, and we're going to get there in a second, when I asked you about some things that you're seeing that are really innovative and transformational, we haven't even touched base yet on where the blockchain's going and things like that associated with integrating SaaS solutions into blockchain for ownership, entitlement, things like that. So one of the quick questions that we had was, Erin asked a question around, how do you convince a SaaS company to give you the enterprise level features in order to properly administrate their product without costing you a fortune? So in other words, some companies are going to give you the baseline analytics associated with their tool base, but if you want the enhanced tool base, you got to pay more for it. And they know that the analytics are probably going to offer you an optimization platform so that you reduce your costs a little bit.
Yeah, great question. And I think SaaS providers are feeling the pinch there. What I mean by that is, in the early days, you had no negotiating leverage. It is what it is. And I know my team, when I was in vendor management, they had to go to the portal, and the reporting of SLAs and all that was extremely poor. But to your point, Mike, they know that if you're able to drive into that portal, and one of the things that I would suggest to everyone listening in is, an observation I have is, while people have access to the portals, the teams have not necessarily really dug in to understand the value of the data that they can extract. So what I would first do is try to have side by side. You may already have sufficient data available to you without having to get to that enterprise class or that higher price license. But again, at the end of the day, having that usage data, not at an aggregate level, but at a very tactical, specific level, having usage data enables you to have a really good point of conversation that I think would support your negotiations and getting the level of reporting you want out of those tenants.
All right, I'm going to ask a real-time poll again, because I want to hear it from the audience. I want to hear it inside of the room, and I want to hear it up on LinkedIn. What are some of the hardest categories associated with SaaS that you're negotiating right now? Is it MarTech? Is it HR tech? Is it FinTech? Is it BuyTech? Where are you having the hardest issues right now? Is there a category, or is it terms and conditions, or is it termination clauses? Where are you having the biggest issues right now? So please fill in on LinkedIn, and also fill in the room. MarTech, I'm seeing marketing coming up. And while I'm waiting on the answers for that, we did touch already on where the talent pool is going. Let's talk quickly about the evolution of the talent. What does it look like today? Let's see, let me ask my question. What does the current talent pool look like for associated with management of SaaS? What do hiring managers need to start thinking about? And I think we already touched on this, which is, hey man, you really need to start thinking about some audit skills here long term, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think the one thing we could do is look at SAM and say, hey, if we had to do SAM over again, what would we do? And in a lot of ways, I was stuck in a position where I was in office space, right? Where I was stuck between the CFO and my director of SAM operations, and I was trying to interpret. So what I would suggest is any organization for SaaS needs to have the back office function, which is really crunching and doing the analysis. And you need to have a strong front office function, someone who could stand capably with your CFO, compliance, head of IT finance, and the others, and articulate the value that they're driving and the process improvement and how that optimization is not just a spreadsheet sell, but it's really enabling the business. And perhaps it's time to market, competitive advantage. Being able to have that kind of discussion, I think, is very, very important for that front office or SaaS leader in an organization.
Yeah. Back to my question that I just asked the community, lots of input here. Security, data privacy, facilities management services, desktop applications, things like Lucid Charts and Tableau, a lot of MarTech coming up in this conversation as places where pain points are. And I'm guessing that has a lot to do with the fact that some of our procurement folks who are traditionally buying SaaS-related products aren't necessarily expert in MarTech. And so this leads to, what do you do if you don't have the expertise, right? I mean, this is really a buy versus build question at this point in time, right? Like, you're not going to be able to cover, this is to go back to a football analogy, because both of us are old ex-football players. You're trying to cover 11 positions with 5 guys, right? I mean, that's what this is.
Yeah, and this is where automation has to come in, and why the SaaS management platforms, I do think, have a great value and a sweet spot, is when you look at things like all these different platforms, and I'm chuckling because I use some myself, but being able to discover how much is out there and then help sourcing negotiate a potentially an enterprise or at least a consolidated view. That's where the platform, you're just not going to have enough staff. And if you ask for that staff, you might get it for 1 year, but at the next budget year, the CIO or whomever you're reporting and CFO is going to say, what did we get for this? Reduce it, change it, eliminate it, reassign to your team.
Yep, completely agree. So listen, we've talked a little bit about rogue spend. We've talked a little bit about how big the market is. We've talked about the opportunities. We've talked about what the community looks like, what the development skills need to be for the future. So people that are in IT category management or managing SaaS, where do you need to start thinking about taking your careers? What should be you looking at? What should you be studying on Saturday nights with a glass of red wine? All of those things. Let's talk a little bit about innovation. So, and this is I'm going to take a question right out of the book here. Somebody inside of the Slack room asked this question. It says, might be out of scope for this session, which I don't think it is, because now we're talking innovation and forward thinking. What has melted Jim's face that he's seen in this space, whether it's a product or a tool or a process or an education? Dave asks inside the group, this might be out of scope for this session, but are you seeing SaaS type models being applied to hardware in a way of competing with public cloud? This is a great question. I love it. Have you seen anything that far down the rabbit hole yet?
That is a very good question. Could you repeat it for me, Mike?
Sure. Are you seeing SaaS type models being applied to hardware as a way of competing with public cloud? So almost SaaS, like, hey, I'm going to give you this network compliance on a rent to own basis, right? On a monthly recurring revenue model. And we're going back to, you don't have to buy the equipment. I'll just put the equipment in your shop, and then I'll bleed you dry on a SaaS type model. And as opposed to, hey, you got to put the capital out there.
That's a really thought-provoking question, and whoever asked that, that's a great one. You're making me think about the old days where it was timeshare on mainframes.
Yeah, exactly, right.
But a SaaS approach to that. So yeah, that it wouldn't surprise me because again, we haven't talked about infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. Obviously, those are all growing like crazy as well. But there's a lot of optimization in the world of Azure, AWS, and others. But boy, that's an interesting one to come back, and the idea of a SaaS approach to that. So
Yeah, Phil inside of the group just said hardware as a service. Somebody threw out, somebody said Ross Perot was the first to timeshare IBM's mainframes. He certainly was, and he had my vote a long time ago. So I'll gladly share with you that I voted for the guy that didn't win way back when.
Let me get my whiteboard out and do my last point.
So listen, we got about 5 minutes left, it's great commentary today. I think we definitely have to do another session on where this goes in the future. I think we'll do something inside of topics and technology with you on this. Absolutely no question about it. Thank you for the question from Dave. Anything happening in innovation in software asset management right now? Like, for example, I saw one a long time ago around Microsoft Office, right? And yeah, now I can see where Microsoft Office is being used. The evolution of the Microsoft Office portfolio. Now I've got different, E3, E5, E1s, right? So I've got different profiles I can put in there. I always thought, God, I would love to have active usage tracking inside of my inside of my asset management tool, so that I could just pay per minute for Word, or like, what are you seeing in innovation in the tools space for us?
I haven't seen anything quite down to that level of dynamically monitoring usage at a per user. And again, if the thought would be, how would you use that data? As my grandfather would say, if you knew the answer to that question, how would it help?
I pay per minute, baby. I want to pay per minute. I don't. Okay, so listen, you're going to get rid of the perpetual licensing model. Yeah, you're going to tell me I got to buy a subscription. I want to subscribe down to the minute. I want IO level Microsoft. I want what I can get with AWS on input output, or on storage, or on network transfer. I want to get that down to how many minutes I use Word, and I want to pay for. I get super users of Word who have the thing clicked on. But what I don't want to pay for is, I don't want to pay for somebody who opens Microsoft Word and leaves it there for 5 days. If he's not actively using the software, I don't want to pay for it, right? And you're starting to see nibbles of that, right? You're starting to see Slack with this. Slack's got that, fair usage program that they have, right? Which is, hey, listen, you can put 10,000 people inside of your Slack installation, but if they're not using it, we're only going to charge you for what you're using. It's almost a nice thing, right?
And to your point, Mike, I think the SaaS management platforms. You also have the SAM platforms that are continually monitoring and pushing successfully into the SaaS management space as well. They're going to be able to monitor that, I think, on perhaps two revisions out. The question goes back to what we talked about earlier. Now that you have that data, how does the staff action that? And do you have the staff to actually produce the analysis that's going to drive that negotiation? Yeah. So there's another level of challenge to get to.
Again, it comes back to being able to build an ROI, which, if you say that there's 15 to 20% savings opportunity here by properly staffing it even on a $10 million budget, you should be able to get 2-3 more people. Again, procurement and sourcing, especially in the IT SaaS space, in my opinion, is coin operated. And if you can't get the head count, bring in the experts, right? I mean, You've got people like NPI who are experts in, Microsoft enterprise class negotiation, or Oracle, or even some of the big ones like Salesforce and things like that. If you don't have that level, please, for the love of God, if you don't have that level of expertise, please bring in an expert, because the amount of money you're leaving on the table, if you don't know how to drive an F1 racing car, don't get in an F1 racing car.
Well, right? and also what happens if we have the opportunity, we do like self audits or the optimization, as we call it. But if we do that in parallel to the organization standing up the platform, there's lessons learned, so they can configure more effectively the platform to support what ultimately is needed.
Great. All right, listen, we're out of time. Give me one thing to take away. What does this audience take away from Jim Hussey, who literally wrote the book on SaaS optimization? Which that's, God bless you, man. That's a big nut to tackle. You wrote the book on it. What's the one thing everybody needs to take away today from this experience with you?
SaaS optimization, or the issue of SaaS, is a multidiscipline, multifunction challenge in your organization. And the more people you get aware of it and on the same page, the more benefit you'll be able to drive and realize within your organization.
build awareness, build team, have them involved, optimize your value proposition, right?
Correct.
Fantastic. All right. Amazing 1 hour conversation. I can't believe it went by that fast. Thank you to everybody on LinkedIn. I think we topped off at around 35 people on LinkedIn, which might be a new record for me on LinkedIn Live. Jim, congratulations on setting a new LinkedIn record with Procurement Foundry today. Thank you to everybody that was in the audience. I know we didn't get to all of the questions. I apologize for that. We're going to continue this conversation inside of the Slack community. NPI and Jim have a channel inside of the Procurement Foundry. So if you want to go in and if you missed a question or you want to talk to Jim a little bit more, by all means, feel free to do so. Jim, where can people get the book? Just real quick.
Yeah, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, The Survival Guide to SaaS Optimization.
Jim's Garage. There are plenty available.
Yeah, my granddaughter's out in front of the house now selling a few.
Great. Thank you, man. Really appreciate it. Lots of fun. Love the topic. I'm sure we're going to do this again soon. Thank you to everybody that chimed in today. Appreciate all the help, Tina, in the back room. And look for NPI again in the future. As I said, they're a new permanent residence partner, Procurement Foundry. You're going to see them at our conferences. You're going to see subject matter expert blog posts. You're going to see more webinars like this from NPI. Thank you, everybody. Thanks to NPI. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. Everyone have a great week. And we'll see you Thursday. I got a big one on Thursday around corporate trade in barter around advertising and marketing. So look for that one too, okay?
Thank you for the opportunity, Mike. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.